All right, so we have our water filter installed. Now we'll move on to programming drinks and the beverage menus on the Magenta and Magenta Prestige. Now, this is actually one of my favorite things about these machines because it's really not programming so much as it is simply crafting your drink the way you like it. Now, what do I mean by that? Unlike other machines from other manufacturers and even other products from Gaggia, the Magenta uses what I've affectionately termed on-the-fly programming. Now, I realize that I may seem like I'm about to fly away from all the espresso I've been drinking here, but it's really that easy to customize your perfect beverage. When you select a drink from the screen, you'll be presented with all the options available to customize it to your liking, including the total volume of coffee, the temperature, whether or not you want it to be a ×2 drink, or if you want to use, say, more coffee in the shot or use pre-ground coffee. So whenever you make a change to those settings after the drink is done being brewed, you'll be presented with the option to save those new settings. So really you are programming on the fly. That's something I've learned to really love about the Magentas, and it just makes them super approachable to anybody who wants to use them, or if you've got a household with multiple people who need to make changes. Let's take a look at more detail on how to program drinks on both of these machines. So here we are on the home screen for the Gaggia Magenta. Now, between the two machines, this is going to be a very similar screen, simply with some different drink options available. Now, one thing that's worth noting on the Magenta is that we do have multiple pages of drinks that we can navigate between, and that's identified by this bottom right-hand button right here. So there's a little green dot that indicates which page of the menu we're on, and simply by pressing this button, we switch to the next page. Now, you can never navigate back, say, by going to the left. You always simply press this button, and it will switch you between screens. Now, on a machine like just the baseline Magenta, that's not too big a deal, but on the Magenta Prestige, it's worth noting that there are 4 pages of drink options, so you will need to continue scrolling to get back to the main page. And as you can see, our capacitive buttons actually are lined up with the different options for our drinks. So let's take a look at just a basic one like an espresso. If we press on that, you see now that the orientation of these capacitive buttons has changed based on the different parameters that we're going to adjust. So in the top left, we have coffee. Now, I left this in milliliters, so if you're up there in Canada, you're probably thanking me. If you're in the United States, 40 milliliters, that's like 1.3 ounces, so you'll have to bear with me here. But coffee in particular is just the amount of liquid that's being pressed through your puck of ground coffee. So this is going to be how much volume is actually in your cup. And now, when you've actually gotten into a parameter like this, you can see that the top left is to reduce the quantity, the top right is to increase the quantity. We have on the bottom left here the ability to confirm our selection, and then on the bottom right we have the ability to go back. So we're not going to change that. In the bottom left we have our temperature, and so that goes between low, medium, and high. Personally, I prefer high for all of these drinks. The range is about 175 to 185 Fahrenheit, but it's always worth noting that your drinks will be hotter, for example, if you're brewing into a pre-warmed cup, and if you have also maybe run a blank shot just to get the whole circuit primed. So your results may vary. There is some diligence that goes into making sure your coffee is as hot as it could possibly be. Now, on the top right, we have the ×2 function. So any drink that's just a standard coffee drink that is ground and brewed, that doesn't have additional things, say like water for the Americano or hot milk, for example, you can double up. And now the way that Gaggia does this is it will actually grind and brew that drink 2 times. And we'll do an actual demonstration of that in a bit, but that's something that Gaggia does that's really kind of neat, because other brands in many cases will simply double the amount of liquid that's brewed through the coffee as opposed to actually doubling the amount of coffee. So if you do a ×2 drink, the 2 ways that I would really recommend using that would be either to A, make the same drink twice, so say if you have a guest who wants the same thing that you're having, or let's say that we had a different drink. I'll just go back. Let's say we're making our coffee, right? So we can get this drink up to about 8 ounces. But let's say you want twice as much ground coffee for those 8 ounces. You could theoretically program a 4-ounce coffee and then have that grind twice. And so you'll have twice as much ground coffee in 8 ounces So you'd really double up on the caffeine. And now you're like, oh, well, how do I increase that strength? Well, that's actually our last option here, which is in the bottom right, which is our aroma strength selector. So you can see the bean icon in the center, and then there are 5 little spaces that fill in with color. And then the last at the top is actually the scoop. And so when you have the scoop selected, that's how you use pre-ground coffee that goes into the bypass doser, which is on the top of the machine. It's worth noting that you cannot do the ×2 option if you're using the bypass because you are filling that group manually with coffee. Now, as I had mentioned previously, there's not really a programming menu in this machine. The way that the Magenta works is that every time that we open a drink, we'll be presented with these options. And so if you ever make a change when you're programming a drink, say, before you brew it, and then you go ahead and press start stop, if you've changed those parameters, when the drink is finished, you'll be prompted with the opportunity to save those settings. And that means that now, the next time that you access that drink, it will have the new settings. So that means you don't have to press and hold any buttons, you don't have to go into specific menus, you can just change your programming on the fly. And that's where that term on-the-fly programming comes from. All right, so off camera, I switched from milliliters back to ounces. As an American, I feel much more secure in my understanding of our drink volumes now. But let's go ahead and actually take a look at how we would do something I just mentioned, which is to brew a blank shot. And so there are quite a few different uses for this. One of my favorites, though, is, again, to just get the circuit preheated. And the trick to that is simply to select the pre-ground option. And if we hit start stop, we'll actually be able to see that in action. So one of the things that I'll do too is I'll make some changes. So not only will you see me brewing this blank shot, but also the prompt to save our settings. So we'll do that now. So now you can see, do you want to save the new setting? We're going to say no, because I don't want my espressos to all be blank. But a couple of things that just happened there. First is that the boiler heated up to brewing temperature. And because we didn't have any coffee in the bypass doser, we ran hot water through both the brew group and through our spouts. That actually can be great to clean out any coffee oils that have been left over, say, in the line, and to preheat this whole mechanism. Now, the Magentas brew quite hot as it is, but if you ever really wanted to get the absolute hottest coffee you possibly could, simply making a blank shot is the best way to do it. All right, having looked at espresso, let's just take a look at some of the other options. We've seen espresso and coffee. Espresso Lungo is similar to the espresso or coffee. This is simply a ground and brewed espresso beverage. So it's going to be all of those same programming functions. Steam is simply a start and stop. So if we press start, the machine will begin heating up to steam temperature. That's how steam works. Now, hot water is a programmable hot water dispensing, which simply dispenses water through the steam wand. Now, this is great if you have a tea that you make every day or hot cocoa or something that requires the same amount of water. That programming can be pretty nifty. Now, the last drink and the most unique one on the Magenta, and this is going to be similar to the milk drinks that we're about to take a look at, is the Americano. Now, the thing that's so unique about this in particular is that you'll see coffee and temperature are still the same, but now in our top right, instead of having a ×2 function, we have the ability to program water. Now, what this is the extra amount of water that is going to be dispensed into our brewed coffee after we're done. So the Americano grinds and brews our coffee, then dispenses water automatically through the spouts to basically fill up that additional volume and make that really just delicious, authentic one-touch Americano. Now, we can still do a pre-ground option for this, but the one-touch Americano is a really terrific drink. It's something that I think is just the best in terms of, say, the full cup of coffee option that's available on these machines. So the fact that Gaggia included it is a really great thing, and it's just something that is, I'd say, to the benefit of all the new kind of programming that's being included in here. So if you've never tried an Americano and you love full cups of coffee, this will take just a little bit longer because after you grind and brew, you're going to have a bit of a delay and then it will dispense that water, but the drink is really phenomenal. So again, though, we can't do a ×2 Americano because it is going to be a phased process for brewing with coffee first and then water. But that's how you'd program the Americano. All right, so let's take a look at milk drinks on the Magenta Prestige. So we had just looked at the Americano. Let's take a look at the cappuccino. And if you can hear that, I have left the button sounds on for the Prestige just so you can get a sense for navigating the machine silent, if you don't want to wake anyone up in the house in the morning, or with the beeps if you prefer that little bit of confirmation, really. So on the left side here, we have coffee and temperature again. And then on the right side now, where we had seen the ×2 or the water for the Americano, we have milk. And simply with these milk drinks, we're going to be programming in the volume of milk. And my one bit of advice that I would recommend to you is there are a wide variety of drinks on this machine that have their default programming. I would brew the drinks in their default configuration first, just so you can get a handle on how the milk foam actually expands to fill your cups. And then from there you can begin tweaking. So like you'll be safe to tweak, say, the temperature or the strength without affecting the total amount of coffee in your cup. But brew a few times, use your favorite cups and and glasses really, see how the drink fills it out, and then make the changes as you need. That's gonna be my little pro tip for you there. I am a pro, so that is my tip, of course. Now, if we take a look here, you can see too that there are actually 4 menu screens instead of the 2 that we have on the baseline Magenta. And so again, you simply press this bottom right button here to navigate between them. We do have hot water again, and that uses a fitted spout that replaces the auto frothing carafe. I will go into greater detail on how you actually install and use that, but that's just something to keep in mind. We have a couple of other drinks that you may be familiar with, things like the Cafe au lait or the flat white. This Cafe au lait is more of like a full cup of coffee that's about 50-50 milk and espresso. Now, if we go into our flat white, this is a unique drink from Gaggia, because the way that this works is that actually it's going to do 2 grind and brew cycles, and then it will have your milk in there as well. So it's a fairly short drink, and it's really about getting like very potent coffee espresso flavor with really more caffeine too, with a bit of that milk to even it out as well. So this 2.7 ounces of coffee, that's actually going to be cut in half by 2 grind and brew cycles. Now, it is doubling, again, the amount of ground coffee though. So if you're, say, somebody who wants that milk, but you really want the intensity of the coffee, something like the flat white is going to be perfect. And again, that's just Gaggia's commitment to really making more authentic cafe quality drinks in these machines. The Magenta and actually only the Cadorna Prestige are 2 Gaggia machines that brew flat whites this way, and they are really delicious. So press home again though. We'll take a look at some of our other options. We do have the Cafe Cortado, which is a smaller, more or less version of the Cafe au lait that we looked at, and frothed milk. So if you ever want the machine to just dispense hot milk, say for cocoa, or if you make chai or anything like that, you can simply just put that in the auto frothing carafe, and it really kind of just expands the overall functionality of this machine. So just pop that carafe out of the fridge, stick it on the machine, and you're good to go. But otherwise, as I had mentioned, milk drinks very similar to how we would program, say, the Americano that we looked at. You cannot double up any of these milk drinks, so you will be making them effectively one at a time. So that's just something to keep in mind if you've got guests. But otherwise, that's how you do milk drinks on the Magenta Prestige.